Greetings and Merry Christmas. I am Captain Summer yet again, but today I'm switching it up a little bit. My goal is to help business leaders and entrepreneurs whose parents, single parents, and who's got kids to better cope with their everyday life, to maximize their life, and at the same time be present and available emotionally with no stress all the time, and especially when they're with their kids, right? That's my goal, that's my mission. Normally I'm covering the stress part, don't stress, relax, and all the tools that you need to help yourself and help your friends and loved ones stress less than they have been before. Today I decided to share another one. I got several questions about how to do the parenting part of it, how to eliminate some of the stress associated with parenting. So if you have a teenager that doesn't show the level of enthusiasm or passion for doing their chores in the house that you hope to see or that you would like to see, this is something one of my clients just told me about the situation and asked me for advice what to do. I shared my advice. My client put it into action and came back, told me the whole thing just melted away. It's taken care of. It doesn't mean it could fluctuate. The pendulum could swing back, right? But what she'd been dreading for weeks and didn't want to do at all, and was almost convinced that it would be like rock against rock, she brought it up and the problem just melted away. Beautiful. And I want that to happen for you. If you have a teenager or a kid who's not doing their chores, this is one thing I can recommend. And first we do the surface level, then we go deeper, okay? So this specific instance, it was about a teenager who was preparing food and eating food, and just leaving the dishes, and leaving the house, going to friends, going to their room, going to for training, etc., and never getting back to the forks and spoons and plates and cups and glasses and whatnot. So that's not a totally unfamiliar scenario for many of us, I guess. And every time the subject was brought up, like, would be nice if you can clean up your stuff, at least put it in the dishwasher. Why don't you do it the others in the house are doing? You cannot leave it like that. That's what had been going on for weeks, and every time there was a snappy comeback answer like, don't have time now, or you're not so perfect either, things like that. So my recommendation was, don't let it fester and putrefy for a single moment. You know you have to do this, so just do it. Get it done. Get into the process of solving it. Don't accept it to go more and more sour. So that's one thing. And my recommendation was, sit down as soon as possible and have a talk about it. And one of my favorite ways is to turn it around. Instead of saying, I have to clean up after you all the time, and you leave too much work for me to do after you're gone, blah blah blah. Then there's blaming, guilt, shame, all that bad stuff that doesn't facilitate the process. Whatever happened has happened. We want it to be smoother from now, right? So how do we put our power, leverage our knowledge so that the sailing from now on is smoother, and so that this teenager can be more aligned and more in tune with people around, and whatever you're gonna live with, boyfriends, other persons living in apartment shared apartments, going camping, whatever. Like, you need to hold up your end of the deals in everyday life like this, right? So then my recommendation is turn it around. Ask, if I left my dishes dirty in the wrong place and I did it again and again, like it can happen once, and that's how it is. Sometimes you're in a rush, sometimes you have too many things, sometimes there's something that's definitely more important. So that can happen. You have to be accepting of that fact. But if you see a pattern, what would you do to get me to take my responsibilities seriously? And then the teenager have to accept that different angle, look at it a little bit from above, and give his or her take on the situation. And they have to be creative, and they have to imagine that they are the one who end up with the dirty stuff and who have to take care of it. And of course they feel then the self-interest, and they go into that role. They feel the self-interest, like, I don't want to deal with other people's dirty stuff. So how would I solve that? Okay, so note for you. Ask the question, if we turn the situation around, what would you do? So that's a nice little trick. And it's not rocket science, right? It's easy. Anybody can do it. Are we done here now? No, we're not done here now. Because if you're serious about this, if you're serious about helping your teenager be more functional in a social setting, like family life, if you want that to really work for them, then this is what you do on the surface level. Turning it around, asking the question on the surface level, that's a good little trick, right? And it could dissolve the situation. But to make it work, and to make it work to the max of its powers, you need two more things. And without these two things, that is not communicated, that you cannot say in words, that's kind of under the surface, invisible, and that the teenager will probably never see or never hear about. Without these things, it's much less likely that this will work, and it will not work that well. So what's these crucial elements? 1, you have the challenge that you have to do this. When you turn a situation around, you have to do it with total ease, total acceptance. You have to be neutral. You can have no attachment. And whatever the teenager says, you cannot be attached to any specific solution or your viewpoint, or the fact that you've been cleaning up for the last 35 days every single day. Like, if you have some of that baggage, it's much less likely to work. So you have to be totally at ease with the situation. You have to be totally comfortable. Whatever the teenager can come up with and share with you, it's good. It will facilitate the process. And you have to keep on rolling with punches. You have to go through the process. You have to work with him or her without hurt, without regrets, without blaming, without shaming, without attachments, without any lack of acceptance. You just have to breathe easy and accept whatever. That's incredibly important, because some people turn it around and they're like, what would you do if you were my father and I left my dirty stuff all over the place and I never took responsibility? If you do it like that, this trick gonna backfire. Because all the resentment, all the hostility is still there. And if you cannot curb it, the teenager will feel it. And despite what's being the open-ended question being asked on the surface, in spite of that, there's blaming, there's guilt, and there's the righteous one, and there's the sinner. So they won't be able to step out of that role of being the perpetrator, being the scapegoat, right? And you sit up there on the high porch. It doesn't work. So it's crucial that you have, and I don't write everything that I told you, but I write just a couple of words. No attachment to any specific outcome or any viewpoint or any interpretation of the past. Total acceptance of whatever has happened and whatever the teenager is gonna say, right? Okay, the last point. This is also really important because this is about the power balance. If you do this right and you ask the open question, and you get into a dialogue. But if that's your final hope, if that's your last option, if you have nothing more to offer and you are sitting there like on needles and you just hope for the teenager to, I hope she will answer the way I favor. I hope she will answer what I hope to hear, because otherwise I got no idea what to do. If you have that kind of feelings, she or he will most likely feel it. And then who's got the power? You are playing your last card and hoping for the best, right? And she can take it or leave it. Or he can answer whatever. He's got lots of options, lots of possibilities. It's free to do whatever he or she wants, and you got only one option and you just played your last card. It's unlikely to work because of that underlying context. So you, and this is another challenge, and it makes it more and more interesting. I hope it doesn't make it more complicated and more difficult. It gets more interesting in my viewpoint at least. Because then you are challenged to come up with an alternative. You have to have another course of action, another response on your part, another way that you can deal with this if this doesn't work out as you hope it will. You have to have something extra. And guess what? If the teenager feels that it's not your last weapon, you have another tool. Or you have a whole assortment of tools, then who's got the power? Then it's you. You got the power. And he or she will feel it and will most likely be very compliant and interested in cooperating with you. And this is what my client did. I told my client all of this, and that this is what was executed, and it worked out perfectly. And I recommend that the other alternative option, the other continuation plan, is something relevant to the situation. Not that usually you get $50 every week. If you don't answer the way I hope for right now, you get $0 the next week, for instance. It's not relevant to the situation. Then you are a punisher. You don't want to be the punisher. You don't want to be the righteous one, putting yourself up there on a pedestal, and then there's the scapegoat at the lower level. You don't want to play into that kind of power dynamic. Turn off the internet for 1 week. That's punishment. And you are the executioner. You don't want that. So what would be relevant if it was all about the dishes? If it was about the dishes, I would say that most relevant solution alternative that I could come up with, and this is what I shared with my client. You can propose, if it doesn't work out, you can propose, have the proposal ready, that you say, so since we cannot make an agreement and don't get to an understanding here, then you will probably leave dirty plates and everything else when you leave the house. Do you think it's fair that I clean up and do the dishes for you after you leave every single time? The teenager will probably agree that since there's no return of those favors, it's unrealistic or it's not fair. So then your proposal, that's totally relevant, could be that instead of you making everything we have here dirty and accumulating it in a big pile, I put your stuff. You get this plate now, you get this bowl, you get this spoon, this fork. You can even mark them, put tape on them or something, and put them all in like on a tray or something. And this is your stuff, and this is what you can use. And if you leave it dirty, it will be dirty when you come back. None of us others will touch it. So then you can lay in the nest that you built. Is it fair? It's totally fair. Is it relevant to the situation? Totally relevant to the situation. Is there any reason for the others in the house to have a growing resentment, to feel more and more angry about the situation? If that person, your teenager, just makes things dirty, put it on the tray, use it, put it on the tray, use it, put it on the tray, until a pain point is reached and cleans up everything, and then maybe start cleaning up after every meal like the rest of you do. Totally. Right? So that's the final little piece of this puzzle, and I had this work wonderfully so many times. It's no coincidence. So put this to use. So I write alternative course of action. You have to come up with something before you get into the conversation, right? And ideally, it's something that's less favorable for your teenager. Not because it's punishment, but it's just a less tempting alternative. It's just something that, yeah, definitely no improvement. Could be about the same level, but don't come up with an alternative that's better. And that's funny when that happens, when the teenagers say, really, you want to do that for me? Okay, that's 10 times better. Poof, then it's gone. And then the teenager won the intellectual battle and the content you were discussing. So, alternative course of action, less favorable. Less favorable for the teenager. All right, that's a long video. That's a lot that I covered, but you got it. Put it to use. It was really interesting, and it can turn a whole family dynamic around like nothing I've tried before in that kind of context. So put it to use and enjoy it. I'm out.